I'm Karima Brown. It's Sunday and it's time for The Fix. Welcome to this edition of The Fix, where every Sunday we hold those in power to account. We tell you why it matters, how it affects you, and why you should care. Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa on Friday chaired a virtual meeting that included all the social partners in a meeting at NEDLAC to discuss and negotiate just how we will move from level 4 to level 3 of the lockdown. And the tough discussion, of course, is about balancing lives and livelihoods. And it's often been presented as a contradiction in terms and as a false dichotomy. And, of course, the process and the outcomes of the regulations governing the economy, commerce and the labour and consumer market has been the subject of intense discussion and tough trade-offs. To help me make sense of it all, I'm joined by the man at the centre of it all, the Trade and Industry Minister, Ibrahim Patel. Minister Patel, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me via Skype on The Fix here. Now, in a paper that you wrote that is published in the Sunday Times this morning, Minister, you say to get South Africa back to work safely, we need high levels of cooperation between employers, workers and consumers to manage the main areas of risk. Just take us through the logic of the risk adjustment strategy at level 4 to get us to level 3 as things stand.
Good morning, Karima, and a very warm good morning to all the viewers. Let me say that when the lockdown was introduced, it was based on slowing down the spread of the virus to give us a chance to put in place a better way of managing it and ensuring that we can save lives. Because the nature of a pandemic is a virus like COVID-19 is going to be with us for a long time until, in fact, we get an effective vaccine. And so it's about how societies manage their affairs, the economy, social interaction in that period. And the virus moves so swiftly and it causes so much damage that we needed a hard lockdown to be able to take stock and say, what can we learn from the rest of the world? And what we learned was that there are certain basic things that reduces the risk of infection and therefore the number of people who may die. And so we use that 52 days, today it's the 52nd day of the lockdown, to build that system. And when we move from the very hard lockdown to level 4, it was the first step in doing so. And what level 4 is essentially about, level 5, by the way, if I can just say, was an absolute hard lockdown. Only the most essential products were allowed for sale, and only those workers who produce the most basic requirements for society were able to get to work, because we wanted to limit movement of people. The virus doesn't move, it's people who move, and when we move, we take the virus with us and we spread it. Level 4 was saying, okay, we think we have a better idea of where the virus and how the virus is entering communities. We don't have a full idea yet. We don't have our toolkit completely ready, but we can begin to loosen up now. And level 4 was about increasing the number of activities that people go to work for. So we brought large parts of manufacturing back to work. Mining was increased, and a few other key sectors. It was also a partial opening of retail, a further opening of retail, bringing more products on, but still trying to limit the movement of people into taxis, in shopping malls, and so on. Level 3 is a further step up. It's really saying we can now use the risk-adjusted model to get more of the economy restarted, because we recognize we need to do both. We need to fight the virus, and we need to have an economy that is functioning, because that puts bread on the table for ordinary people. It generates the wealth that government uses to fight the virus itself. And by the way, economic opening can have, if it's properly managed, and we can come back to that, it can have a positive effect even in fighting the virus. So So level 4 was a partial opening. It was really trying to see, can we test the systems? Can we open it up a little bit? And then get back as quickly as possible to level 3, which is a further significant opening of the economy. Even in level 3, it won't be all of the economy that will be open. Not every single activity will be enabled yet, but we hope it can enable South Africans in significant numbers to be back at work, and for us all to have the kind of freedoms to do in our ordinary lives what we can do, subject, of course, to trying to ensure that we don't spread the virus too fast.
Minister, let me just come in quickly. You've explained the logic. You've also explained the fact that it's a system that needs to be very nimble, that needs to be alive to the very real challenges, and that you're learning. A lot of people simply want to know when we are going to go to level 3. Are you in a position to tell us?
Well, the President will make that announcement, and we expect that announcement will be done fairly soon. We're not talking about a very long period. It will be very imminent that the President will address the nation and indicate that. And he will also sketch a framework of the kind of things that will happen in level 3.
In terms of level 3, we've also seen the Health Minister, Willem Mkhize, speak about what he calls a district approach, and that is very much determined by the levels of infections and hotspots. How does that intersect, Minister, with your brief around sectors and opening sectors of the economy and making certain sectors able to reopen? We saw, for example, that you legislated regulations to open e-commerce up completely after that wasn't the initial, logic. So what exactly is going to happen when we have a district approach that's impacted on by infection rates, but also a sectoral approach in terms of the economy? How are you going to intersect and make those two speak to each other?
Well, they are, in fact, very, very connected to each other. And as we developed the model, they grew organically together. So let me illustrate it. And I start with e-commerce. When we were in level 5, we wanted to limit movement in communities and on the roads and elsewhere as much as possible to give us the time to figure out how to sensibly and a bit more safely enable more in the economy. So it was about the most basic goods, your basic food stuff, your health supplies, hygiene supplies like cleaning materials and so on. And that could be obtained, of course, from stores and from e-commerce. In level 4, there was a significant opening of parts of manufacturing. So all of manufacturing enterprises went back to work, but not at full production. And so in the first period of level 4, we had e-commerce as an enabler for hot foods. In the second phase, which we announced last week, we opened up e-commerce much more widely. We had now completed our consultations. We had spoken to store owners. We had spoken to the e-commerce operators, trade unions, and others within government, and we opened it more widely. Now, we did that because e-commerce provides an enormously useful opportunity to get goods to the homes of consumers with contactless arrangement, with fewer people coming via car and taxi to the shopping mall, and fewer people interacting at the shopping mall. So we've got those tools ready. Now let me come to the district model. From the start, the risk-based approach said, let's try to see how we can use the sharpest possible weapon to deal with the spread of the infection. A hard lockdown is a very blunt weapon. It's very effective in curbing the spread of the virus, but it's blunt, meaning it's not able to contain the price to the most minimum necessary. It imposes a wider price on the economy and society. And so you want to, after you've used the blunt weapon, you want to look for sharper tools that can more narrowly focus on dealing with what is required. So in the first lockdown, it was a national lockdown. It covered all districts and metros in the country. As we move forward, the system has been built that it allows now for a particular district, if it's so warranted by the NCCC, for a particular district to be in lockdown. In fact, we're increasingly developing the tools to go even into a sub-area, a suburb or an industrial area within a district, so that we can contain in the narrowest way possible where the virus is being spread, quarantine as many of the affected people as possible, use tracing, contact and tracing systems and technologies to see who else may have had it. So instead of taking 60 million people and trying to hold all of them at home, which is not doable, and it fringes on freedoms, it impacts on the economy, we're now trying to see where's the highest risk. And the district model enables that. Using the sector tools like e-commerce, we can then navigate, we can calibrate the degree of openness of retailers and others in that area that has been identified. So as you can see, it's about building a more flexible, collaborative approach, because government has to set a broad framework, but in the end, we've got to work closely with business, with consumers, with workers, with all South Africans really, to make this thing work.
Now, Minister, you have come under criticism that your lockdown rules and regulations, particularly what people could buy, that is before you opened up e-commerce fully, that it was pretty arbitrary, particularly the kinds of winter clothing that people could, obtain. What was the consultation process that you engaged in to arrive at your list?
Okay, so let's start with the process itself first. When we decided that we needed to now move from level 5 lockdown to level 4, the government published a document setting out the kind of products at each level. And if I take retailers, I just want to use this to illustrate a broader approach. We said opening all of retail would ensure so many people in taxis and at the malls that those become vectors of transmission. How can we find a sensible way of reducing that? And the most pressing need in the clothing area, of course, is winter clothes, because winter is also a key enemy in the fight against COVID-19. During cold temperatures, the evidence from elsewhere in the world appear to be that the rate of infections are higher, and fatalities, the number of people who die when they've been infected, seems also to be higher. Very similar to what we've seen historically with flu, that COVID seems to thrive in cold environments. So we put into our framework that winter clothes would be the first leg. We want to open all of clothing as quickly as possible, but initially winter clothes. And based on all the inputs we received, that was then put in the final regulations. And we left it at that. Retailers then came to us and said, look, there's so much confusion in the market. What is meant by winter clothes? Can one take a T-shirt and regard it as winter clothes because you wear it under your normal clothes? And we said to the retailers and manufacturers and unions and others, why don't you, as a team, draft a list, what you think would be a sensible list, and we can then issue it as a direction. It's not a regulation, it's a direction. I mean, in other words, it indicates to the society the kind of things that the regulations imply. And the retailers then did that. They did it very collaboratively. And they said to us, can we widen the list as much as possible to cover all the kind of products that sensibly can fall within the heading of winter clothes? And we said, absolutely do so. So, for example, short-sleeve T-shirts would be an example of that, because people do wear it under their main clothing.
Minister, we've got to take a short break. When we come back, we are going to talk a little bit more about just whether it's wise for the state to get involved in that level of detail in terms of running people's lives, and whether the disease that we're fighting, is something so big that government needs to almost, in a commandist way, take charge. I'm in conversation, of course, with Trade and Industry Minister Ibrahim Patel. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will continue our conversation. Stay with us.